Good morning. We'll get started with this morning's agenda. First item on the agenda is FN 2019-001. That's 27 Glasgow Street. Anyone in support or opposition, come forward, please. You're the applicant. You can come down here, please. Good morning. Your name?
Jay Harrison.
Jay. Good morning, Jay. Staff's recommending approval with conditions. Have you had an opportunity to review staff's report?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any questions or comments? Okay. Questions, comments, Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been talking to the representative from our transportation department with the city, and in fact, the fence does not. It's not in the daylight triangle. The daylight triangle is actually on the church property, so you're actually allowed to build your fence right along the rear property line if you so choose.
Okay.
Okay. We can get clarification from staff in a second. I was wondering if you would like to move that fence in from the Gruen Street property, say 2 feet, in order that you could landscape on your own property rather than the city's road allowance.
Right.
I can show you a sketch of what it might look like, because you're actually going to gain amenity area in your backyard inside a fence.
The triangle, right.
Yes. So what I'm showing is the daylight triangle on the church property, because it's measured from where the driveway is. So the daylight triangle is actually on their property. And I'm suggesting maybe you move your fence in a little bit off the property line, and then you pick up that corner at the back.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Can the folks with staff clarify that I'm correct?
Mr. Chair, through you, I was speaking with a committee member, and we spoke about this, and I support the change.
Okay, great. So you're willing to amend your application accordingly, Jay?
Certainly, what's involved.
Works out better for you in any event.
Sorry, what's that?
Works out better for you in any event.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah. Okay, so the application is amended accordingly.
Yeah. Could I move the recommendation, Mr. Chair? And is it possible the Secretary Treasurer could give me that sheet back again, because I actually have the wording on that part. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So committee, if you look at the resolution, what you'd be doing is permission to construct a 1.82 meter high wood fence located 0.6 meters from the side lot line abutting Gruen Street rather than 1.5 meters, and then the rest of it would be removed except subject to the following conditions. That's my resolution.
Okay, this is a motion on the floor. We have a second. Bob, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please be advised that this committee doesn't have final approval. Council has final approval, and it will go in front of council on January 29th.
Okay.
So it would be a good idea to be there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next application is SG 2019-001, 70 King Street East. Anyone in support or opposition, come forward, please. No one? All right, we'll set this application aside for right now. Next application, SG 2019-002. It's 439 Park Street. Anyone here in support or opposition? Come forward, please. Good morning.
Good morning.
Your name?
Joanne Malhotra.
All right, Joanne. Have you had an opportunity to review staff's report?
No, I haven't.
Staff are recommending approval with conditions. You want to have a quick look at that? Do you have any questions or comments of the conditions?
I don't have that. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, I have a question for you. Can you explain the third-party advertising component? What's that all about?
The third-party advertising,
Yeah.
is that, you mean on the sign, there's going to be the people upstairs, the anesthetists, they have a little blurb on the bottom of it. I don't know if on the sign it shows you that.
Okay, so then in fact they're a tenant,
So
occupant of
that's
that?
just a tenant from
Okay.
upstairs.
Yes, Bob? Other side.
Mr. Chair, if I understand it correctly, the issue is that the sign will be on city property, and the sign is not promoting a city product, so it's a sign off of the property, which means it's third party, I think.
Okay, great. I just want clarification for that. It was just a little bit ambiguous, so, okay. Anyone have any questions or comments? Scott?
Just one to the applicant. The one condition that you might be worried about is just getting it done by June 30th. Are you okay with June 30th?
Yes, I think that should be fine.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to move the application.
All right, second. Mike, all in favor? Carried. Please be advised once again, this committee doesn't have final approval for signs, so this will go to council on January the 29th. It'd be a good idea for you to attend. Thank you. 29th, it got moved. Next application is A 2018-127. That is 659 and 663 Victoria Street South. Anyone here in support or opposition, come forward, please. Okay, good morning. Your name?
Rima Masri.
All right. Have you had an opportunity to review staff's report?
Yes.
Yeah, they're recommending approval with conditions. Do you have any questions or comments regarding the condition?
Well, I'm the architect on the project, so I'm here to answer any of your questions. And I can make some clarifications to the design as why we're requesting these reliefs if the committee is interested in knowing more details.
We can't hear you. Can you speak into the mic, please?
I'm the architect on the project, so I'm here to support the application and explain as how to some of these reliefs requests came about through the design process.
Okay, thank you. Maybe what we'll do is we'll hear from the people who you're objecting, I gather. So, your name, please?
My name is Trientje Vos, and I'm actually three of my co-unit owners of 51 Paulander Drive, a condominium complex right behind the proposed 7-story apartment building. I live in Unit 105, two of them live in Unit 122, and the other in Unit 118. We are very concerned about this project. Even though it says there are minor variances, and even the report that we were given just now, it says so, some of the variances are almost 50%. The area along Victoria and Westmount is mostly buildings of not more than 3 stories high, apart from the high-rises on the corner of Victoria and Westmount. 7 stories will look out of place. The footprints on the 2 lots will be too big, according to us, and not leaving enough space for parking. In the area, there is no parking at all except on anybody's own side. And that will, as far as we think, create havoc. But we are also very concerned about the effect this project will have on our condominium complex. The lot slopes to the back, and on our side there is a 4-foot drop to our ring road. We have in an area a retaining wall, and in another area a steep sloping lawn. Right now, the properties numbered 659 and 663 Victoria's House have gravel and sandy surfaces. Rain will penetrate the soil. However, if a paved parking lot is installed and if no proper drainage to city pipes is constructed, the water will run onto our property, quite likely damaging the retaining wall and the sod on the sloped grass. We own our own infrastructure, and we do not need to have it taxed more and potentially damaging it by a runoff water from another property. This would increase our condo fees. The chain link fence on the back of the 2 properties is owned by our condominium corporation. This has already been damaged by the trees that grow on their side, and in the past few years by garbage that's thrown against the fence, making an unsightly mess, plus tenants that climb over it. We do not need to see more garbage from 92 units or people climbing over the fence. A wooden fence on their side would help, and indoor garbage would be good to keep vermin in check. We are very concerned that because of actions of others, including the city and the developer, that our property values may go down. A lot smaller development would be preferred.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Marie Stuartus. I live also at 51, but I live at unit 135, which is really, really close to Polander. So I live at the beginning of Polander and the unit. My concern, and I totally agree with what my condo board member has just mentioned, but in addition, my major concern is parking. Like, I see that the reduced amount of unit, for 92 units or close by, they're talking about 74 spaces. 10 of them, when I read the staff report, will be visitor parking, and 1 car share, so that's close to 11. Like, my numbers may be off, like mathematics is not my strong point here. But at least 74 missing spaces according to the zoning bylaw that you ask 1.5 parking space per unit. 30 years ago, you were asking 1.25 per unit. You increased it to 1.5 because there was a need. And this project is reducing it to a lot. And I'm really concerned. One example is at 65 Polander, which is the apartment building that is at the corner of Polander and Victoria Street. It was allowed to have only 23 spaces for about 48 units. When you walk into this foyer of this building, there's 3 signs. 2 of them handwritten, plastered over the door, saying no visitor parking. There is no on-street parking overnight. As you all know, we're not allowed to park on the street. This means that there's no visitor that can sleep overnight, visit from out of town in those units. Again, saying that there's going to be over 10 parking units at the beginning of the development and enforcing that afterwards is 2 different stories. And I'm sorry, but I'm sure that at 65 Polander there was supposed to be visitor parking. and it is not enforced and there's no longer any. This means that the few visitor parking space that we have on our condo will be used because people will be desperate for parking. And again, that means that we will have to police our visiting parking space much more, increasing our fees again. And this is really the main concern here, is the parking space.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we'll hear from the applicant, and you can just walk us through your application, how you ended up here, and address maybe the concerns that were raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Diane Freeman, and I'm here with Masrio Architects as well. I wanted to thank the neighbors to this property for raising their concerns. The applicant's here today, and they've heard them. With regard to some of the things that we heard, in terms of the height of the building, there's quite a grade change on Victoria Street between the front of the property and the rear of the property, and the folks made reference to it when they spoke about the retaining wall. And so when you look down Victoria Street, you have quite large apartment buildings at the corner of Victoria and Westmount, and then across the way there's some 6-story units. And so because of the grade change, this building actually looks very similar in height to the properties that are across the street and down the way. In terms of the slopes and the concerns around surface water, those are concerns that we took into account on this property because our client was worried about them as well. And so we've worked with city staff and the region is, it's really important to the region that water be infiltrated from this property into the groundwater system. And so there's been a lot of conversation about how to return that surface water back to the groundwater system. And so the client will be installing a fairly elaborate tank system that will collect that surface water and then direct it back into the groundwater reserves. And I appreciate the comments about the chain link. We'll try to keep that in mind and work hard not to damage the fence. And in terms of garbage and management and blowing of garbage, we'll be managing the garbage on this properly internally effectively. And so it will be different how the garbage is managed going forward because it will be internal to the site. We appreciate the parking concerns, and this was also something that we thought a lot about. This is a very unique development where we're proposing to create bachelor units, and they're designed to a very specific housing need within the region. And our client owns several other buildings very near to this where it's the same setup, and the parking is effectively unbundled from the unit. And so they will not be renting the unit to someone if they don't have a parking space for it and they need the parking space. So the goal is really orientated to individuals that live without use of a permanent or ownership of a permanent vehicle. And the location of the property is very conducive to supporting that because there's bus routes that take you right down Victoria Street into the higher order transit, namely the ION. And you can see also in this property that we've created indoor secure bike parking to also support use of the trail systems, which this property is very close to, namely the Iron Horse Trail. So it is our intention to manage the parking, and I appreciate the concerns. I'm sorry that other property owners nearby have been parking in your visitor spot. I don't think it's really convenient for people to reside here and then go around the block to try to park in your condo parking spot. So we're happy to take that back and make sure that we communicate that to any clients if we hear of it happening. In terms of, I think that I've covered all the comments, and I guess I'll just finalize by saying that we support the staff recommendation in the report, and if the committee had any other questions of us, we'd be pleased to answer them.
Good, thank you. Any questions, comments, Scott?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through to the applicant, just two quick ones. You've answered my question about size of units, so that's wonderful. The interface along the rear property line, where we're getting the issues expressed from the residents of the townhouse project. Can you explain to me the width of the landscape strip, how the grading's going to work there, and what you're intending to do as far as landscaping?
I can speak to that. Grading on the site, something we're paying very close attention to because there is a severe slope. One thing we avoided doing is putting a 4-meter retaining wall at the back for respecting the neighbors and what they're going to see as the back of our property. The grades are designed in a way to direct the water inwards, so we're gently at 5% sloping at the front of the property, and then that eases off to a lesser level, and then from the back of the property, it slopes back towards inwards the property, and that's where we have the inlets for our in-ground infiltration gallery system that's going to collect the water. And around the property, we also configure the grading so that the retaining wall is not more than 4 or 5 feet maximum. Most areas is at around the 2-3 feet to keep it as a good design respecting the neighbors. Fencing is something as is grading is controlled through site plan, so we're in the process to submit applications, the detailed drawings through the site plan application within a couple weeks. So if there's a desire for a fence, a wooden fence as opposed to the chain link, that shouldn't be something that the owners would object to.
Can I address the same question to staff? Can I ascertain what's the status of the site plan and how is grading on the rear property line looking?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The site plan's received approval in principle, so they're working through the detailed drawings.
Okay, and the parking, the row of parking, there's roughly 10 or 11 spaces. How elevated above the rear property line is that?
Sorry, you're asking grading?
Yes.
So I would have reviewed the grading plans, or design staff, engineering staff would review that.
Okay.
But just keep in mind that as of right, this application permits multiple dwellings, so you're going to see parking lot towards the rear either way.
Yeah. What's the width of the landscape strip there?
I believe it's 2 meters.
Doesn't look like 3.
1.65.
There you go.
Is there any opportunities of increasing that to get some more landscaping in there?
Our minimum requirement, or standard requirement, is 1.5 meter landscape buffer with a 1.8 meter high visual barrier, which they'll be required to provide.
Okay.
Any other questions? Bob, did you have something?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you to staff. The one condition, I'm a little confused exactly what it's asking for. Is it that the details of the transportation demand management measure is to be determined by the Director of Transportation?
Through you, Mr. Chair. What we're asking is that these 3 TDM measures that they propose be incorporated into the site, and we support these TDM measures that they're providing for the property.
So I'm guessing that the TDM measures have not been processed yet, or they're still pending, or there's flexibility in there? I'm just a little confused. It's early in the morning.
It's going through the site plan process, and I believe the 63 internal spaces will be on site, and I believe they noted a car share space on site, and the unbundling of parking, they've already mentioned that that's something that they're going to be doing with the apartment building, so that meets our requirements.
Okay, yes, Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That just generated one more question for staff. On that condition, there's really no trigger as far as timing related to it. Would you prefer it to be prior to site plan approval, prior to building permit? Should there be a trigger?
Well, one of the conditions of site plan approval is that the variance is in full force and effect. So you have to satisfy the condition of the variance to get full site plan approval, so it's not required.
All right, anyone else? Questions or comments or motion? Scott?
Just want to make a few comments. I've heard the issues from the abutting neighbors. In my mind, realistically, the variances that have been applied for, the side yards, the front yard, really don't affect them, and the size of the building is actually in keeping with the city's official plan. The one issue that might, but I don't think it will, is the parking, because I think there's going to be a perimeter fence around this entire site, so it's a long way to go all the way around this site to get into that townhouse project. I am concerned about the interface at the back, so I'm just suggesting to staff that they look at landscaping and a good interface there, because obviously there's a visual image, but when the time comes, I will certainly support the application.
Mr. Chair, based on the comments and discussions, I would move that this be approved as per the staff's recommendation.
Second. Mike, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application is A2019-001, 439 Park Street. Support or opposition, come forward, please.
No, I didn't get that. That's okay. Sorry.
Hello again, Joanne.
Hi.
This application is pretty straightforward. Staff's recommending approval with no conditions. Any questions or comments? Motion? Okay, second? Yeah, Bob?
Just a quick question, Mr. Chair. The parking spaces that are 0 meters from the street, they're existing?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so motion on the floor for approval. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next application is A2019-002. It's 106 Idle Creek Drive. Support or opposition, come forward, please. Oh, you're the applicant?
I am.
Okay. You messed me up there for a minute. That's all right. You can stay there. That's fine. Your name?
Jim Abelbot.
Okay, Jim. Staff's recommending approval with conditions. Have you had an opportunity to review the staff report?
I did. There was one condition I'd like to ask about.
Sure.
It mentions, just a second here, mentions dogwoods that the builder actually put in when he built the units, and they've been gone for 15 years and replaced with cedars, which some of them you can see in the picture. Should I put some in anyway?
It's already landscaped. I'll direct that question to staff.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The comment, it's not a condition. The comment indicates that they would propose that something other than dogwood be planted in the area, which if you've already done that, then that would satisfy that condition.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anyone have any questions or comments? Bob?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a quick one regarding the environmental comments. I'm not quite sure what the last sentence means. Once the landscape planting is complete, staff can redline the approved plans on file. Is that meaning it's going through site plan?
That would be referring to the subdivision files that created the lot originally, so showing something different than other than what was approved at that time.
Okay, I guess I'm just not quite sure what the term redline the approved plans means.
The revised existing plan.
It's just a city revision.
Yeah.
Okay, I just hadn't heard that terminology before. Thank you.
Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, based on my site inspection, again, I didn't think that the landscaping condition was required, so I'm prepared to move actually the recommendation without any conditions, to be approved without conditions.
All right. Opinion of staff?
If there's going to be some landscaping that is removed or destroyed as a result of the construction of the deck, staff would prefer that the condition be retained. The emphasis is on a scoped landscaping, so it's going to be very minor in terms of what the applicant will be required to replace or restore, depending on what is damaged during construction.
All right. Does that satisfy your concern, Scott, or you just don't want to see it? Are you still recommending on your motion to remove it?
Based on what I've been told, I think it's fair to leave it in now. But again, I just a word to the applicant. I don't think it's going to involve much. I think you just have to show you what you've done, show the city, and then put it on a plan. Okay. So I'm prepared to move with the conditions.
All right. Second.
Mr. Chair, based upon my colleagues' comments, I too am in favor of this development, so I will second.
All right. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Next application is A2019-003. It's 487 Riverbend Drive. Supporter opposition, please come forward.
Good morning.
Good morning, Heather. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good. Staff's recommending approval without conditions. Do you have any questions or comments? Recommendation, motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is just to add a health clinic and health office to the permitted uses, which I think is quite in keeping with the whole scope of this project, so I move that this be approved without conditions.
Second. Mike, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application is A2019-004, 54 Bridge Street West. Supporter opposition, come forward, please. Morning, how are you?
Morning, thank you.
Your name?
Martin Knowles.
Hi, Martin. Have you had an opportunity to review staff's report?
Yes.
Okay, they're recommending approval with a condition. There was also some comments from the City of Waterloo. I'm not sure if you saw those or...
I did.
Or not. Just making reference to them. Any questions or comments? Bob? Scott?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm generally in support of this application. The building department has asked for a building permit, so I would like to add a condition to the recommendation that the owner apply for a building permit.
All right. Conditions, that's recommendations amended. Scott, did you have any?
Yes, I had a question for staff, but based on what my colleague has indicated, I'm not sure I saw the building permit request. I thought that was on the next application, but is it comments? Okay.
Yeah, it's under the comments, 1, 2, third page at the bottom.
Okay. I wanted to compliment staff on a very good report on this particular application. and I get a good picture of where we are in the site plan approval process. Based on comment previously, though, is the site plan condition redundant? Because that was similar, because until you get the variance, you don't have site plan, so it says the owner received final site plan. I don't understand. We're taking a different approach with this one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the applicant has received approval in principle, not final site plan. And one of the requirements of final site plan is that he get the variance, so they're connected with each other.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, doesn't that give us the same conundrum that we were dealing with on building permits?
Potentially, yeah. They get signed off at the same time, so.
Okay, anything else? Any questions or motion?
As amended?
As amended? Yep, as amended, yep.
I'll second that,
Second.
Mr. Chair.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application is A 2019-005. That's 362 Edwin Street. Anyone support or opposition, come forward, please.
He doesn't have his mic on. Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe one committee member doesn't have his mic on, so it's difficult to hear him from here.
Okay, good morning. Your name?
Kirk Van Oss.
Hey, Kurt, have you had a opportunity to review staff's report?
I have, yes.
Okay, they're recommending approval with no conditions. Does anyone have any questions or comments for the applicant? Scott?
Just a quick question to the applicant. I think you've owned the property since it was converted into a fourth unit. Why didn't you apply for the permit back then, and why are you applying now?
It was converted 2 owners previous to me. So I purchased the property in good faith, believing it to be a fourplex.
So you inherited the problem?
I didn't inherit the property. I inherited the problem, yes.
Okay,
Sorry,
okay, fair
yes.
enough, fair enough. I have questions of staff, but no more of the applicants.
Okay.
Just a question of staff. Should we be, or what is the status of the permit? Has the applicant applied? And if not, should we be imposing a condition that at least he apply for a permit on this application?
As to the status, I think that question is better asked of the applicant, as I'm not aware of whether. And yes, I think if the committee wishes to add that condition of making an application for a building permit, that's fine.
Okay. So back to you, Mr. Applicant. Have you applied for a permit?
At the recommendation of the building department, this was the first step, so I have not, and I'm happy to have it as a condition. If you want to add it, it's the next step.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just a comment. What we see here is some issues that of legacy issues where people don't apply for a building permit, and I've always applied for a building permit, and I think that's important, what's necessary. I feel sorry for the applicant that he got caught by surprise, that 2 previous owners went ahead and built something without a building permit. So I would recommend that this be approved with an additional clause in the recommendation that the applicant apply for a building permit.
Second? Second. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you.
Next applications, A 2019-006, 925 Thomas Petter Court. Anyone here in support or opposition, come forward, please.
Good morning. Pierre Chauvin, MHBC Planning, here in support.
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
Good. Staff's recommending approval without conditions. Is there any questions or comments? Scott?
Mr. Chairman, I have, if there's nobody in opposition, I have no issues with this application, and I would move the recommendation.
All right. Second? Mike? Did you have a question, Bob?
Again, Mr. Chair, should we not put in the condition that the applicant apply for a building permit? Building department has requested that. So I would like to make
Scott, do you want to amend your recommendation?
Sorry, I'm happy to amend it according to my colleagues, so.
All right, so it's just a condition for just the application. All right. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next applications, A, 2019-007, 35 Trillium Drive. Support or opposition? Come forward, please.
Morning.
Your name?
Mark Steiniger.
Good morning, Mark. Have you had an opportunity to review staff report?
I have.
And they're recommending approval with conditions. I just had a question for staff on the recommendation. The applicant had asked for 250 square meters, and the recommendations reflecting 300. Why is that?
Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. I think 300 square meters is the maximum permitted. We're actually requesting 215.
We thought we'd give him some flexibility in terms of like the space. That's the maximum size of the unit, so it just goes hand in hand with the actual unit size.
Okay. All right. Anyone have any questions, comments? Scott?
Just to the applicant, so I understand you're happy with the conditions? You can live with them?
Yep. Oh, 100%.
Okay.
You applied for a building permit already?
I'm not building, I'm a tenant. In the
You're the
building, the
tenant?
building is established.
Provided a building permit for the interior alterations are obtained is what building comments
Yeah. I had a
state.
meeting with the landlord on Friday. They are ready to submit the building plans. We already have them drawn up upon clearance of this committee meeting.
Okay.
On that note, Mr. Chair, wanting not to sound like a broken record, I would like to put in a third condition that the owner apply for a building permit for the interior renovations.
All right.
So then a question on that front. This might be a chicken and egg situation where I need to apply for the occupancy permit and allow the appeals period to expire before the landlords can apply for the building permit. How do I best address that timing, that race condition?
Julianne?
That's the situation. Like, I mean, if he has to apply for, you're going to have to wait until the appeal period is over to make that. And if you're acting on behalf of the owner to make that application, that's a normal procedure. So, okay.
Okay, so recommendation is still amended. The building permit. Bob?
Mr. Chair, I move that this application be approved with as amended with the three conditions.
All right, second. Mike, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application is A 2019-008. It's 242 Ingleside Place. Support or opposition, come forward, please. Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Your name?
It's Cody Willens.
Okay, Cody, staff's recommending approval with no conditions. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Scott?
Very similar comment, and this is either to the applicant or to staff. Have you already applied for a building permit for
Yes.
the...
Yes, sir, I
perfect.
have.
Thank you very much.
All right. Anything else? A motion? You have to turn your mic on, Mike.
I'll move that this application be approved as submitted.
Second? Scott, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application is A 2019-009, that's 63 Pinedale Drive. Support or opposition, come forward, please.
Good morning.
Good
Tim
morning.
Fady, agent for the owner in support.
Good morning, Tim. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. Staff's recommending approval without conditions. It's a fairly straightforward application. Anyone have any questions or comments? Scott?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I don't see it as straightforward based on my site inspection. So the comment to the applicant is the one space is not usable because of the trailer. What's your client going to be doing with that trailer? Is it going to be parked there the whole time? Because if not, you don't have the 2 spaces.
I don't think so, but I can't say for certain. I think it was, the applicant was just based on the setback wasn't sufficient, and, well, you can read it, the interior garage is not available for parking.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Chairman, again, through the applicant, I understand that it looks like the garage was converted at some point in time, and you've got 2 spaces out the front, which you need, and they're just in the wrong locations, but the one is occupied by a trailer, and that's what concerns me. So effective, it's 1 space that you're asking for, which is, I'm concerned, because there's 2 units.
Well, I don't think the trailer has to stay there.
I suppose they just moved the trailer. It's as simple as that, really.
Perhaps through you, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
The committee might consider a condition that the trailer has to be removed in order to satisfy the second parking space, because otherwise, as Mr. Hanna pointed out, there may not be sufficient room to park in front of that trailer without overhanging onto the city sidewalk.
The only problem with that, the way I see it, is is if the trailer happens to belong to the applicant of that unit and they don't have a vehicle, why are we imposing that they have to move the trailer? I think we're nitpicking this, to be honest with you. That's my opinion anyways.
Mr. Chair, if I could address my concern, then the application is not for reducing 2 spaces to 1. It's actually just for the 2 spaces to be located in a different location. I have concerns if it's only 1 space available. So if it stays the way it is, I will be recommending against.
All right. It's my opinion. I don't believe the trailer is an impediment, given the fact that it's portable, but that's my opinion. So,
Can I ask a question,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, through you to staff? Is not a trailer, okay, parking is for vehicles. Is a trailer not considered a vehicle? I understand under the bylaw it might have a problem with year-round storage in that particular spot, but I don't think our parking requirements have any conditions as to the shape, size, or color of a vehicle parked in a parking space. So Mr. Chair, I'm kind of with you on that. It would make it easier for the applicant if we could just Photoshop that trailer out of the picture, but I don't see that as a great impediment.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can also offer that as a single detached dwelling, they only need 1 legal parking space.
Correct.
So legal size parking space. So the second one would be incidental. Hopefully that helps Mr. Hanna's concern as well.
Sorry, is not the application for a duplex? Permission to convert semi-detached into a duplex?
No.
Then you would need 2 spaces. Yeah.
Or sorry, existing, well, the single detached dwelling to have there, okay, I
single detached dwelling,
apologize.
yes.
I'm looking at the wrong application. I apologize sincerely to the applicant.
Yeah. All right. Based upon that, do I have a recommendation, a motion?
I'm actually prepared to move it now. Thank you.
Okay, second. Bob, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Stupid. Okay, next application is A 2019-10. It's 150 Mill Street. Support or opposition, come forward, please. Yeah, exactly. Good morning, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Your name?
My name's Janelle Hill. I'm the applicant.
Janelle, have you had an opportunity to review staff's report?
Yes, I have.
They're recommending approval with conditions. Do you have any questions or comments regarding that?
Not regarding the staff report.
All right. Questions or comments? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see a slide in there. All right. You're in opposition, I gather. Your name?
Peter Sterling.
Peter, okay, I'll give you the floor.
I wouldn't say so much opposition as more just a couple of concerns I wanted to bring up. I think all of us as neighbors would be in favor of any change to the current dwelling, but increasing it by almost 100% of its size is a bit concerning, and it's unprecedented on Mill Street. Mill Street is the oldest street in Kitchener, and half of it is considered heritage designated, the northern half. It's also borders on the heritage zone, as the report points out. I think my only concern is that the report captures some of this, but it's not, we don't see that in the conditions that are included. And so I'll give you a few examples from the report, if I could. It points out that the residential character of the neighborhood, while allowing a slight density increase, will be kept. It will not adversely affect the functionality of the surrounding neighborhood. It will not present any significant impacts to adjacent properties or the overall neighborhood. And it will provide a new housing form at a scale and density that is appropriate to the context of the existing neighborhood. So I think this really captures what Mill Street is and what we as neighbors or community members want to see kept. But in the actual conditions, only a building permit is required. And I wonder if there's a mechanism that could be put in place to ensure that heritage staff who've already commented and perhaps the planners have some input on the style of that new housing form. That's all we're told at this point. I can understand that the developer may not want to bring in community involvement in the plan for that. I don't mean to be onerous about it, but at least perhaps if city staff were part of that process, then there would be a feedback opportunity to neighbors.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the request to increase this to a triplex is in keeping with the low-rise nature of the neighborhood. An R5 zone doesn't automatically permit a triplex, and that is so that it can come to the committee and the committee can consider it. In terms of the massing and scaling, this is a very large lot. There is room to accommodate things that may sometimes concern a neighborhood, such as parking and what have you. There's a lot of room on site in order to develop a 3-unit building. That's what we're talking about, 3 units. It is not in a cultural heritage area. It is adjacent to a landscape, a cultural heritage landscape, but it's divided by the railway lands. So staff had no concern from a heritage perspective that the impact of adding a 3-unit building in a neighborhood that has predominantly singles and possibly even semis or duplexes, that is relatively in keeping with the nature, that low-rise nature. Staff don't have any concerns with allowing this development to proceed.
Thank you. Bob?
Thanks to staff for clarifying that, and to the concerns of the neighborhood. And it's always good to pay attention to what's going on in your neighborhood. This property is going to go through site plan, so any concerns with input from the staff will be dealt with at site plan. So I'm fully confident that staff can handle that portion of it. It's nice to see some intensification in an area where there's lots of space. It's a nice big lot. So, Mr. Chair, I will move that this be approved with the additional condition that the applicant apply for a building permit.
Scott?
Just a couple of questions for staff before we consider. What is the status of the site plan application? Once I get staff's attention. Sorry, I just wanted to know what the status of the site plan application is.
I don't believe that they've applied for a site plan application. That's why we're making it a condition of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. The second question I had then is the conditions have to be fulfilled prior to September 30th. Now, I realize there's an extension there, but that may not necessarily be enough time for SBA. Now, what are the mechanisms for the extension? Is it fairly simple?
Yes, simply the applicant, if they require additional time, they contact me, and then I make the necessary adjustments if required. Yeah.
Okay.
That are reasonable, adjustments that are reasonable. Or if the committee so chooses today, they can also extend this period.
Yes.
So you have two options. Yeah.
Yeah, so the question to the applicant, the September 30th completion of conditions, one of which is the big one, the site plan approval. You satisfied that you're going to be able to achieve that?
I would like an extension.
So should we make it to the end of the year with the same extension?
Yes, that
possible?
would be great.
Okay. My experience has been you at least need 6 to 9 months to do through site plan, and this is going to be pretty complicated, I think. Yep. So I would like to, first of all, compliment the applicant. I think this is a good infill based on the size and shape of the property. Compliment staff on the report. I think it's an excellent report. I support the conditions. The only thing I would suggest is that we modify condition 3 to read December 31st, 2019.
Yeah, and just further that, that's a good point, Scott, further that with the inclusion of the building permit application, they can't make application until the site plan's approved, so.
Okay.
Yeah, we definitely need the additional time.
Mr. Chair, I think that's a good solution. I agree with the extension of the time, so I will move that this application be approved as amended with the date and the building permit requirement.
All right, second. Mike?
Just
Scott?
clarification, application for building permit, not
Yes.
issuance.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you. Okay.
Yeah. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, next application is A 2019-11. It's 270 Spadina Road East. Anyone here in support or opposition, please?
Morning, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, good morning. How are you?
Good. Pierre Chauvin again with MHBC Planning. Here on behalf of the applicant who's with me, Stephen Litt with Vive Development, here in support of the application.
Okay, staff's recommending approval with conditions. The only question or comment I had, maybe you can just address this, is should this have some type of a timeline put on it to ensure the second phase? Because if the second phase doesn't ever happen, then...
It's through you, Mr. Chair, I believe it's likely market-driven, so depending on, the market conditions, I would think that it's challenging to put a timeline on that.
Can you guys address that for me?
If I may, Mr. Chair, it is through a condominium, how we're creating these phases. And so, again, it's hard to put a condition through that process in terms of implementing that second phase. The whole intent with this variance was to ensure that in the event that, for whatever reason, it doesn't proceed that second phase, the site can still function and complies. Basically, the site exists today with the parking. If the second phase doesn't proceed, none of that will change. But the reality is we are proceeding with the second phase. We're working through site plan approval right now, so I don't believe that will be the issue here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several questions for the applicant and staff because I'm very confused about this application, so maybe you can help me out. Sure. The existing building that's there, is that the first phase that you're talking about? Because it's not very clear from the report.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. Yes, okay. So the existing building has underground parking. But there's also, you'll see in your photo, there's some surface parking in the rear. But that forms part of the second phase of the condo because it will be redeveloped with a deck.
Okay, excellent. That helps me out immensely because I was going to move for deferral. But can you also address, or maybe staff, what the earlier variance was for? It was listed as A 2017-028.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. The previous variances were to recognize, we were redeveloping the existing building, and we had to recognize existing setbacks, as well as, if I recall, I think there was the floor space ratio issue because of the existing building didn't comply. So that was generally the nature of the first variance. Having said that, we've also gone through an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, which permits the second phase, the addition of another 6-story addition to this. And so what we're proposing is all still in conformity with the adopted official plan amendment and approved zoning bylaw amendment. Again, what we're trying to do is just facilitate this phasing while we go through construction. It's a bit of a challenging site, and that's all this is really about.
Has the first phase achieved site plan approval?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it has.
Okay. That also addresses a huge question. Will there be anything in the condo documents that talk about the limited parking for the first phase?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I may have to defer that to Craig, and I see he's got his mic on, and he can...
Through you, Mr. Chair. So one of the conditions is in the purchase and sale agreement or rental agreement that they provide notice to tenants and future tenants of the limited parking for the future, or the phase 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all my questions, and it's helped.
Okay. Anyone have anything else?
Through you, Mr. Chair, or to you, Mr. Chair, I understand your concern about what happens if Phase 2 does not proceed, then parking is a problem. That was my first thought. But if Phase 2 does not proceed, there's all kind of space that this could be adjusted to deal with the extra parking that may be required. So other than that, I think this is a great concept, and I think that we should move ahead with the one condition. So I will move that this be approved with the one condition as in the staff report.
Scott?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
All in favor? Carried. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Next application is A 2019-12. It's 50 Moore Ave. Anyone in support or opposition, come forward, please.
Morning.
Good morning. Your name?
David Van Schaik.
Hi, David. Have you had an opportunity to review staff's report?
Yes, I have.
Recommending approval with conditions. Do you have any questions or comments in that regard?
No, just a quick typo. The spelling of my last name. Could I just... It's S-C-H rather than S-H.
Okay. We'll amend that. Thank you. Anyone have any questions or comments? Scott?
Just a couple of questions for the applicant. What are the size of the units that you have on Moore there? What's the size of the home plus the other apartment?
Yeah, so the two units are the whole level. So the first level is the one unit, and then the second level is the whole level. So it's about, I'd have to check, but they're quite large.
Maybe number of bedrooms would help.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I may be able to assist. The upper unit is 102 meters squared, and 1,100 square feet, or 102 meters squared, and it's 3-bedroom. And the main level is about 900 square feet, or 84 meters squared, with 1 large bedroom. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I noticed in the application as well that I think you had a bit of a discussion with the city about whether this had existed forever and ever, like it should be legal nonconforming. The city has basically come to the conclusion it ceased at certain points in time, correct?
Staff can provide some clarification
thank
for
you.
you, Mr. Hanna. The only item that is legal nonconforming for this site is that 0 spaces, parking spaces, were required because in 1962 there was no minimum parking space required. There was as a result of, I guess, a complaint to our bylaw enforcement officer. So parking is not legal nonconforming. It's a use, 1 space rather than 2. So we're improving the situation. So what was legal nonconforming would have been 0 parking spaces. So we are legalizing one of 2 that would have been required under today's rules. So in actuality, we're kind of improving the situation rather than just allowing the legal nonconforming status of the 0 parking.
Thank you very much for that explanation from staff. I know my colleague's going to be very happy with condition 3. One just final question for the applicant. Have you ever had any issue with renting the unit for someone without a car or needing the parking space?
No, not at this point, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you have a question, Mike?
Actually, it was just a curiosity. The photograph indicates the third floor. Is that in use by the second tenant?
There is a staircase up to the 3rd floor, but it's quite small, and the 3rd floor is just an attic, unfinished. Yeah. So they might use it for storage, but not for living, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Just curious. And and that is an area where on-street parking is not permitted at any time. Am I correct?
It's permitted, I think, just in the winter months. It's not permitted.
Okay. Any other questions or motion? Scott?
Mr. Chairman, I was initially a little bit concerned about this, but having seen the property and the way it's all set up and hearing from the applicant, I'm prepared to move the recommendation as is.
Second? Mike, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next application is B 2019-01. It's 427 Old Chicopee Trail. Support or opposition, come forward, please.
Good morning.
Good morning. Your name?
Maria Caveras, owner of the property.
Okay, Maria. Have you had an opportunity to review staff report?
I have.
Okay, they're recommending approval with conditions. There's a regional letter, and we require the conditions from that as well, please. Also, I just had a question for staff. Well, the one condition is asking for Phase 1 and Phase 2. Why are we automatically asking for Phase 2? Because if a Phase 1 doesn't identify the necessity of a Phase 2, then why are we doing it? Or why are we forcing the applicant to do it? It's very costly.
I think we could put in the words "if necessary."
It doesn't say that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps that's something that the committee could add.
Okay, so I'd like to amend that, I guess, that the Phase 2 would only be necessary if identified as a requirement through the Phase 1. Yes, Scott?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, you were on the same page as me. I was actually going to be adding the words "if necessary" after Phase 2. So that's one comment. I also talked to staff, and just to warn the applicant, I believe there's a condition that's missing regarding the demolition of the existing unit. It actually straddles the property line, and when you see the next application, you'll notice that there are conditions imposed about demolishing and that kind of situation. So I'd like to add a condition that the existing dwelling at 427 Old Chicopee Trail be demolished. The owner shall secure required approvals from demolition control and demolition permits as may be required. And for staff's benefit, that's the same wording that was used in the next application.
In principle, I'm not opposed to it. I just wanted to add that as of right, you cannot create a lot through a house. Therefore, the house has to already come down anyways. And demo control is required with or without a condition. So I just wanted to put that out there. It may also be one of those circuitous kind of things. So.
Yeah, in my experience, Mr. Chairman, just to comment on that, I have seen a situation where demolition was not done, the deeds were endorsed, and you end up with problem with title because you have two people with a house sitting on it. So I would like the condition to be added.
Sure, it's a matter of house cleaning or housekeeping. All right, does anyone else have any questions or comments? Or a motion? Yeah, the region conditions have to get inserted. Yeah, Scott?
Just a compliment. I believe this is a really good infill project. I liked staff's comments. Again, just based on what we talked about, I would prepare to move as amended with the, if required on the ESA, the adding of the demolition and the regional condition.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next application is B 2019-02, B 2019-03, B 2019-04, and A 2019-013. That's 25 to 31 4th Ave. Support or opposition? Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Okay, there's a regional condition as well to get inserted into here. Okay, staff's recommending approval with conditions. Have you had an opportunity to review staff report?
Yes, I have. I'm Brandon Flewelling, agent for the application from GSP Group. I've looked at the report and worked closely with staff through the application, so I'm in support of the recommendations and the numerous conditions for each application as outlined.
Okay, thank you. And your name?
Daryl Flewelling. No relation that I know of.
Two W's or one W?
Yeah. Sorry?
Do you have two W's?
Two W's.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, Daryl, just turn the floor over to you then.
So we are the owners of 37 4th Ave, and we had some concerns with the overall plan of the property. Unfortunately, we just got the plan this morning, so we didn't have a whole lot of time to go over it. So based on what we've noticed in the plan so far, one of the problems that we have, one of the concerns that we had was for the future Lot B, very limited overall width of the property, and that would be abutting our property, I believe, as well from the plan. Being that there's a significant grade in the property, and we have some pictures to show the grade if council would like to see. You'll notice that the first property sits significantly higher than our property, so that would be bring in some privacy concerns for us, and the fact that the housing in that position would be overlooking ours significantly if it's very close to the property line. The second concern we had with the property line along those lines is we've had people out to take a look at the actual line before, and the retaining wall between the properties is leaning at this point, so we were wondering what the actual survey for the property looked like, and if it was accurate to where the retaining wall was, that could affect where the trees are on the property line as well, whether the trees are our property or the neighboring property. We were not sure.
We have concerns with drainage. So the property sits 3 to 5 feet from our, if you come out our back door, you look at the property next to us, they sit 3 to 5 feet above us, depending where you're looking on the property. We've had problems with drainage in the past, coming straight down onto our property. So now we're looking at 3 houses with all the construction and everything, draining right into our backyard.
A lot of the space in between used to take a lot of that drainage and soak it up. With no housing in between, with no space in between, we're concerned with where the drainage is actually going to go. We've had problems with the coming right down on our property into our house, and it being an older house, not a whole lot we can do with that drainage coming down.
And the retaining wall is much lower than the property, so everything is going to come right over top of it. So it won't be satisfactory to catch anything.
We also had some concerns with parking with the number of buildings going up. We do have one building similar across the road that has very limited parking, with the parking very close to the road. That's caused numerous cars to be parking on the road outside of the houses as well. With 4th Ave being a very busy bus fare, it's caused numerous issues with buses coming along that route as well.
So the developments on the street are very similar to what they're asking for. We've had multiple developments of duplex properties, like multi-unit properties done.
On the other side of the street?
On the other side and down further. We're the only one that sits at a different elevation. So this proposal is actually different than what's been done on the street already. We sit quite a bit lower than these two properties beside us. And also, the trees between the properties, so you can see the two big pine trees between our property and the one for demolition, and then between that one and the one next to it, there's a row of cedars. And then beside 25, I believe it is, there was a whole row of pine trees that just went down in the windstorm. And then Highway 8 is on the other side of that, basically. We lost 5 of the pine trees 6 months ago, and we hear a significant difference in sound coming from Highway 8. If they take the cedars down that are between those two houses, and then they try to take the pine trees down between ours, we're going to get excessive noise coming in. So now, for new development, they have to have air conditioning units to block the sound for new houses. We don't have that existing in our house. So we see a potential problem there, and we need to know how, or we would like to know how that's going to be addressed as well.
Mr. Chair, through you, if I may ask staff one question with regards to drainage, or I'm going to ask 2 questions. The first one being on drainage. That would be dealt with through the building permit process, would it not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct, Mr. McCall. It will be dealt with through the building permit process. And all on-site drainage has to stay on-site. Yeah, that is the intent of that. Yeah. Maybe we can just give a nudge to the building department that when this comes forward to make sure that that doesn't get missed. The second question I have for staff is based upon the opposing people that because of the proximity to the highway, should there not be noise warning clauses in this application? Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure that the region commented on that aspect, and I don't know if Ms. Saunderson has a comment from the region to that effect. I don't recall there being any comment from the region, and they're the ones that would be requesting it and would be implementing that. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I agree with staff that this is a region circumstance, and maybe they just missed it, but based upon the experience that I've had on this committee for a couple of years, that anything with that proximity to a major road, not that I want to usurp the authority of the region, it should be made, at least I figure it should be made known to the applicant and the other citizens here that I understand the conditions of noise, and maybe it should be, well, I'll just leave it out there as a suggestion.
Thank you. Just a question for the neighbors. So you're located west of 31.
That's correct.
And are you talking about the little retaining wall that you can barely see at the back of the property? Is that what you're describing?
It's about
Yes,
3 feet high.
3 feet
You
high.
can't see it.
Yeah,
the way it
it's
stands.
right beside the 2 pine trees there.
If you go to a different picture, you can see
Okay,
it.
yeah, I see it. It's kind of circumventing the pine trees. Yeah. The one assurance I can give you as a former municipal staff member, there will be a grading and drainage plan for this particular property if it is approved, and there will not be the allowance to drain any additional water onto your property. So they'll be doing a grading and drainage plan. So it might actually improve your situation. Yeah. That's just the one comment I would make to you at this time. I have several questions and comments for staff eventually.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, just to provide some clarification, our staff person had just passed the regional comments to me, and there was no mention of noise and that there is no objections to the applications. So the region has looked at it, and so there was a... Yeah.
So in the new houses that were built, that was a stipulation that was put in specifically, because I read it in their agreements, that they had to have the air conditioning units there to counter the noise factor for the new units from the highway. So we're going to get direct impact then once those trees are down.
That's a stipulation that comes through from the region. It's not general. It's not something that's asked by City of Kitchener staff. It's the regional staff. And like Julianne indicated, for whatever reason, in their review and their comments back to us, they didn't request that at all. So we can't really, I don't know what to say beyond that. So
Is there no way to take it back to them, to bring the matter to their attention, should they have, just in case they missed it?
Well, the air conditioning units wouldn't be to your benefit in any event. It would be for the occupants of the property,
Yes, no, I
right?
realize that.
So,
My concern lies with taking the
Trees
out
and
in between the
noise barriers
properties.
away from the highway.
Yeah.
is there any landscaping requirements, Julianne, to this?
They are single detached homes, so
No, I didn't.
they're not subject to site plan
I
approval.
didn't think they were single attached homes or duplexes.
They're looking to duplex on each parcel,
That's correct.
which
Scott?
means there's going to be...
Was it one of our conditions that we had? Just a moment. Let me look at the staff report first.
Sure.
There is a tree preservation plan that is required as part of this application, which will mean that the applicant has to retain someone to prepare that, and that would be to investigate the condition of the trees that are on site and take measures to preserve as many as possible. But that said, the ones that are perhaps in poor health or what have you, and that would be assessed through this tree preservation plan, may have to come down. So I think a lot will depend on that, but perhaps the other Mr. Flewelling might have something to say about that in terms of what his client is prepared to do.
In response, Mr. Chair, the trees have been set. We've had staff go out from GSP landscape architect staff go out, identify the trees and assess them, but it'll be subject to city review as to what if they agree with the findings and so on. With respect to the noise, the condition's not in here, and I wouldn't want to. I'm not going to recommend we impose it, but I think the building mass, should this plan go forward, the number of new buildings in the area are also going to help to cut down from that noise, more so than the existing trees would. To a certain extent, I'm certainly not a noise engineer to confirm how the noise travels, but I think there would be benefit from the new buildings to reduce the noise impact in your yard specifically. And as some of your other concerns, grading plans will be required, servicing plans are required. We need to submit building elevation plans and identify how the parking will work, all through the conditions of approval that have been recommended. So a lot of those issues are still to be further addressed and refined. But the first step, obviously, is asking for permission to create the lots. Then the next step is the detailed work that goes into making sure that when they are if they are created, that they don't impact your property or others.
Thank you. Scott, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have several questions of staff that might involve the applicant. Just on the variance application, the way it's worded, the resolution, the last part is really a condition. And when I move this, I just want to hear your thoughts on making that a condition number 1 and asking for it to be done by a certain date. And I guess the question and this is removal of the lean-to. And the question to the applicant then would be, what would be a suitable time frame for that, in your opinion, for that removal?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the removal of the lean-to, I would suspect, obviously it needs to be at some point beyond the appeal date. So assuming things are in force and effect, but then a month or two after following that or something?
I was thinking summertime kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that would be reasonable.
Okay, fair enough. The second question,
Sorry.
if staff would pull out the sketch showing the proposed severance, and maybe the applicant would do the same, so we can get this clarified. The way it's set up on the sketch, you have a severance of 25, which is 7.315 meters, and what you're doing is you're going to add that to the small strip that's on the retained parcel next door. But the way the decision is rendered on that first application is talking about a severed parcel that's 12.8, which is not correct.
Staff can provide some clarification, Mr. Hanna. It was through consultation with our legal department as well as with Ms. Saunderson in terms of what is the appropriate sequence of registration of the lots in terms of what the registry office will accept. It was through consultation with city staff that the changes were made to what was originally applied for. Diana can probably get into a little bit more detail because she deals directly with the stamping and certification of the deeds. So it was through consultation with our legal staff that staff suggested to the applicant that these changes be made. The applicant had agreed, and we have an email confirming that the applicant agrees with what is before you now, not what was originally on the application. Diana, if you wanted to add to that, perhaps that will help clarify those matters.
The two lots are whole lots on a plan of subdivision, so by changing what was identified as the retained to a severed parcel, the two remnant parcels left over from 25 and 31 will then merge on title. So it actually assists the transaction in eliminating a lot addition, which could cause issues with future transactions with the once a consent, always a consent.
Yeah, and I'm familiar with that, very familiar. So I'm asking why then, with the changed application, are you asking for the once a consent, always a consent on that first application? Because you in fact have a 12.802 meter wide lot there.
So on the actual plan itself, the two small portions of 25 and 31 that are left over will merge on title. So that would be the reason why it would be beneficial for those to become a retained lot. What will happen, it's a parcelization technique that the Land Registry Office started doing in 2012. It allows a builder to sell a lot to a future builder. It's very tricky.
Okay, we'll have a conversation offline.
Thank
because,
you. Sorry, one quick question regarding the deadline. I'll help you with the parcelization. It has to do with the transaction. It's very odd. Regarding your deadline for the variance, I don't mind if you impose a deadline, but there's a condition in the consent application that the variance receive full and final approval. So that would require the applicant to complete that condition within 1 year.
Yes.
Just if you want to impose a further trigger, I just need to know a deadline, but otherwise it would get a deadline due to the consent application.
Yeah, understood. And it has to be less than 12 months. And I think reasonably, if, once spring starts, I'm going to say July 1st.
Yeah,
so,
it's not a problem. I just want to let you know through the consent application, that variance, if you move it to a condition, it would have a 1 year timeline no matter what.
Okay, and the other question I had for staff, and I'm going to be moving an additional condition, is you've talked about the removal of the house on, I think it's application B 004. There's also a garage that needs to be demolished, so I'm going to suggest that it say the dwelling and garage be demolished. That's going to be my suggested amendment.
Anything else? Yes.
Just one quick question for the applicant. Are you aware of the new urban design guidelines the city is looking to pursue? Have you talked to them about trying to meet their no protruding garages on 9 meter wide lots? Because it's going to be tough.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we are aware of those and the REENT guidelines, and the conditions speak to providing building elevation plans and so on to address those. So we will do so.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? Scott?
I'm prepared to move the minor variance application, restructuring that last part to a condition 1, that the existing lean-to structure be removed from the shed prior to July 1st, 2019. I'm satisfied with what our Secretary Treasurer said about the conditions, but I would like a condition added to 004, condition 6, that the existing dwelling and garage be demolished.
Mm-hmm.
And were there any regional conditions to be added, Mr. Chair? Just the fees?
Yeah.
So if we could add the fees as well?
Yeah.
I'm prepared to move all the recommendations.
Mr. Chair?
I'm prepared to second that, Mr. Chair. And
May I ask one more question?
Sure.
For the space in between the properties, with the fact that the retaining wall has moved, is there any way of knowing where the actual property line is for that? Just because, I mean, the retaining wall itself has come our way, so I don't know where the actual plan is for the edge.
Maybe
of
you can take that up with the applicant afterwards. We don't have that information here. We do, but I don't know how it relates to yours anyways. All right, so second, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry.
He's
Sign?
here?
Yes.
All right. Sign application, SG 2019-001. Support or opposition, come forward, please. Your name?
Jared Herb.
Jared, have you had an opportunity to review staff's report? They're recommending approval with conditions.
Oh, yes.
Yep, okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Bob?
Mr. Chair, through you to staff, we don't often get these cantilever signs coming to the Committee of Adjustment. And so maybe my question would be, does staff know whether there's an engineering requirement for these signs? Because they are cantilevered.
I'm not aware of any. There are existing cantilevered signs off of the property, and the applicants are simply changing the signs. That said, staff had concerns with it being a heritage building, and if you are removing the sign and brackets and or any kind of structure that has to hold the sign, that the fascia of the building be repaired with appropriate heritage experts. That was more staff's concern in terms of...
Generally, Bob, that's dealt with through the encroachment agreement, which they're going to have to get an encroachment agreement. So under the encroachment agreement, the owner, not being the city, takes on full responsibility, liability, and has to they'll have to submit a plan and a specification for approval. They'll also have to provide an insurance policy with the city named as additional named insured and take on the liability. So there's a couple mechanisms through that encroachment agreement that deals with that concern that you brought up. It's the same way with awnings. There's a lot of times awnings will encroach into the city right away. Same deal. Okay. Is there any other questions? Scott?
Just one of the applicant. Are you okay with the conditions?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Motion?
I move that the application be approved with conditions.
All right. Second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. Thanks. Please be advised, this committee, we don't have final approval on signs. We make a recommendation to council. They'll have the final approval, and council will be meeting January 29th. So it would be a good idea to be there, I think, to attend that council meeting. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, okay.